What could be the next move for Ken Hughes, Franks? Do you expect a trade? Do you expect some kind of movement? Can you share with us what do you think what could happen with the general manager Ken Hughes?
I think they mentioned that they wanted to get better this year. So while we said that, it's logical to expect that the youth and the players who had not so good seasons can bounce back and take step forward, I think Kent Hughes will still try to bring someone into the team that fits their timeline, that doesn't, jeopardize the rebuild, and also that makes sense as a cultural fit or a positional fit. That said, to me, there's a couple names who have been floated. We talked about Zegras, we talked about McGroarty, we talked about Necas. These are all guys who could be fits in that department. The one I'd be most interested in if I'm Kent Hughes is probably McGroarty. He has a bit of a different profile than the other two, I find. That could be more complementary, as a bigger body, as a more of a meat and potatoes, north-south type of guy that can really play like a forechecking game. He would be your step up on Josh Anderson, right? In the sense that he plays a very similar style of hockey, but he's a young guy coming into the league that could give you many years, like Josh Anderson has. But unfortunately, it looks like Josh Anderson, we'll see if he bounces back, but ultimately it looks like he's on the decline. I think it could be an interesting target. And there's also the fact that there's tons of defensemen on the left side. Yes, they're going to have probably to bounce one to the right side to balance things out with the departure of Kovacevic. But I think they're probably still looking at that surplus and trying to make sense of it and find who's the odd man out and evaluate that, where that fit could be, where the other team would be looking at a guy that they have in surplus. They have a ton of assets in the future. They do have 2 first-round picks next year. And ultimately, if they're in the mindset that if they add that last piece of the puzzle in that top 6 legitimate forward there, they don't really need their picks next year as much. They have they probably have a core they feel comfortable in the back end. They have a stud defenseman in Reinbacher. They have Gooley there. They have a stud goaltender in the making in Fowler as well. And in the top 6, if they do get that trade guy from a trade, then they're set up front as well. So realistically, they don't need much in the next couple of years in terms of drafts picks. So these could all be in play, in my opinion. But yeah, Kent Hughes said he wanted to help this team be more competitive next year. And ultimately, he hasn't made any trade to make that happen. So I'm still convinced he's trying really hard to make that happen, especially if Ivan Demidov is not coming over this fall.
One name I noticed that isn't on your usual suspect list, like the names that we hear floating around right now, is one Patrik Laine. Is there a reason why you wouldn't have him on your list, or not on your top 3 targets of who you'd want him to target?
He's an interesting case. I think in terms of culture and of fit, there are some question marks. I would say, not that it wouldn't work out or that they should abstain, but I think they're going to have to do a lot of due diligence to make sure that there's a natural fit. There's the whole assistance program ordeal situation also to keep in mind and consider in that department. That said, they do have the cap space for him. It's a very short term. I do believe there's only 2 years left to his contract, so it's not like it would be sort of a transitional player. So in terms of timelines, I think it all makes sense. I just have a feeling, and I don't know if that's how you feel about it, Marco, and maybe that will change, but I have a feeling that this probably would have happened by now if that was the realistic trade scenario that they wanted to make happen. It just feels like it could have been something that I don't know that it would be so difficult to achieve that kind of deal, because Columbus reportedly said that they wanted to trade him, that he wanted out. Montreal has tons of assets. I'm sure they wouldn't sell the farm for him, but ultimately, I don't know that the cost would be preemptive, especially if it helps you offload someone like, say, an Armia or a Josh Anderson. Not that they're not wanted, but ultimately, like, if you're taking some contracts, you probably want some contracts going the other way. But yeah, I don't know that the cost would be so preemptive that it hasn't happened yet. That's to me, that's the smoke that I smell that tells me that maybe this is not their main priority or target.
I think probably the thing that really complicates it is his participation in the assistance program, right? Like, there's probably some due diligence that they have to do there, and he's maybe not out of the program, and that might be kind of a reason. Like, maybe they have agreed on kind of what type of assets are there, or maybe there's a couple of teams that are in the running for it, and they're evaluating which assets they like better as a package. Like you might be right, but I think in this case, it's not just a hockey trade, right? Because there is those extenuating circumstances. To me, it doesn't raise too much of a flag just on how long it's taking, just because there's all those weird things going around behind the scenes, right? Out of the names that you've mentioned, like for me, Necas is probably still the top target that I would like to see Montreal go after, just because even though he's not the perfect centerman, he's played some center, but as we've been talking about a little bit, and I think we'll get to talk to this later, Frank, is, like I said, I cried a little bit when Kirby Dach got injured in the second game of the season, because he's probably my favorite Hab at that time, right? And I was excited to see him play and everything else, but there are still question marks there, right? Like, hasn't played a full season in the NHL. Is he, like, he has all the tools to be a center? But so for me, we did this show, and it's going to, like, we did a recording looking at kind of what the missing pieces are in the rebuild. I'm convinced that, like, a lot of talk has been around acquiring a winger to complete the top six. But for me, if I'm Kent Hughes, I'm looking to get a second line center, because it's just insurance for Kirby Dach. Right? Because if it works out with Kirby Dach, great. Like 6'4", big, rangy, competitive center. Like, he has all the tools, right? But that's why, and we've talked about this here before, is that was probably the most disappointing thing from last year. It's not that they didn't make the playoffs. It's not that they didn't get more points. It's that we didn't get to see and test Kirby Dach over the whole year. Ken Hughes has talked about this several times, right? It's hard to really analyze where we are as an organization, because both Newhook and Dach missed a lot of time last year. I think this year is really about, if there's one piece that this whole rebuild is teetering on, is Kirby Dach. He is the most important piece that needs to work in order for this whole thing to work, because you have to have a strong center position, right? We'll have to see how it works this year, but if I'm looking to acquire a top six player, I'm looking for a center more than a winger. Curious about what you think about that.
And that's why I like McGroarty, who plays wing but also can play center and has played center, similar to a Necas who can play both. I like the idea of having them on the same line for that purpose, right? So if you want face off, a certain side, if you want, if one game.
New subscriber, welcome to the house.
So to me, that's why I like McGroarty, because McGroarty has, and that's what's the rumor that we're hearing is he wants like a secure spot in the top six, right? So right off the bat, if that's the guy you're getting, and these are sort of the terms in getting him, then I think playing him on a top six position is a gimme, and therefore playing with Kirby Dach, where they can sort of swap roles, and if one, by God hope it doesn't happen, but like if by unluckiness it happens, then he can step up in the center position. You have Newhook as well that can do that, but I would prefer McGroarty. Yeah. I see more Newhook as a third line guy.
It's one of those things, right? Like, when you see players drafted, it's like 80% of the forwards are listed as centers. Like, having watched some McGroarty tape, and I don't think he's played any center in the NCAA. So has he played center at lower levels, and was he drafted as a center? Maybe. But I don't know. I don't really see McGroarty. Like, I see him as kind of like more of a north-south winger guy, that with a net front presence, more so than a center who's going to, cover a lot of ice. Like, he's not the best skater. That's probably the biggest concern with McGroarty, is his skating, right? In Martin Saint-Louis system, where you're playing a hybrid man-on-man, I don't know if Rutger McGroarty is really going to be able to thrive as a centerman. I see him more as a winger. Again, Necas, he has played center at the NHL level, right? Hard for him to really carve out a spot with guys like Stahl and Aho, and in the past, like Trocheck was there, so he hasn't really had that opportunity. But he's the opposite, right? Like, he covers the ice like nobody's business, right? Like, I think would perform really well playing center ice. Like, I think he has the vision for it too. Like, he can kind of slow down the play, circle around the top of the zone, find openings. Like, I just see his game more tailored to play center at the NHL level in a Martin Saint-Louis type of system. But, whether it's a trade like that, I'm going to throw a name out there. Like, the term of his contract is a bit prohibitive, right? I might get crucified for this, but let's say, and probably just a smidge too old, but let's say a Nazem Kadri. So Nazem Kadri, like, I'm not saying that you should trade for Nazem Kadri, because he's got, I think, 5 years left on his deal, and he's 33. So a little too much term, but a guy like that, right? Like, if you were to if you could trade for a guy that has NHL experience, could come in really, because I think there's another thing is, we need a little bit more experience, right? Like we talked about the Ottawa Senators and the Buffalo Sabres. That's why like Sean Monahan would have been interesting. It's too bad that he, signed for a 5-year term, right? It's the same kind of problem there. But if you can find somebody that's a little bit younger or a little shorter term to come in and play that kind of role, or someone like Necas that I think can come and play center, that would be my preference. But who knows? Like Dach could come in and just blow, like I hope so, right? Because I love the guy. So he could come in, completely solidify, and we never have a conversation again about our depth at center. I hope that's the case. If I'm Montreal, I'm a Habs management, and I'm looking at this rebuild, that's the one thing that keeps me up at night is my center line.
Yeah, I'll say 3 things on that and I'll close on this. But yeah, so number one, I bought a Kirby Dach jersey right before the season and he got injured right away, and I was just as sad as you were. So I'll agree with you. I think the ceiling is there, man. I think honestly, it's not crazy to think he could put 70 points this very season. So if he stays LP and maybe this is the season where he shuts that doubt for everyone, there's that. And I think that's probably why management didn't offer point number 2, Sean Monahan, a 5-year deal because of that reason, because they probably believe that this is the make or break year for Kirby Dach. And if it doesn't pan out this year, then they're going to trade, during the season if they need to take someone who has a not so great contract just so that they can have someone anchor that line in the 2 or 3 years to come. My only issue with the Necas thing is that you're gonna have to pay the man. He's gonna be UFA next year, I believe, right? So not only he's
RFA right now.
RFA right now. There you go. So not only are you gonna pay top dollar to acquire him, but then you're also gonna have to pay the man. And that could complicate things, right? So they have this pipeline of youth coming up. They have these first big contracts in Suzuki, etc. So I think if you look at the structure and how they build the team, I think they're probably looking at, not giving $7 million for year 3 or 4 from now, and probably looking at having guys like Hage, like Beck, like Roy, and etc. being sort of the under guys that can sort of be on bridge contracts, etc., so that they have a very balanced structure in 4 years from now where they're going to be in the window.
Thank you to watching another Habs Nation video. But before we leave, we invite you, don't forget to click on the like, subscribe to the channel, and finally let us a comment about this video. And remember, you have greatness inside of you, and we wishes you an amazing, great, and blessing day.